Maya Reyes had $43 in her bank account the morning she drove Elliot Voss for the first time. She knew the exact number because she had checked it twice before leaving the apartment, once when she woke up at 4:30, and once while standing in the kitchen in the dark, drinking coffee she'd made with grounds that had already been used the day before. The coffee tasted like warm regret. She drank the whole cup anyway. Ximena was still asleep. 7 years old, her daughter slept like the world owed her nothing and she planned to collect. One arm dangling off the mattress. A stuffed rabbit named Biscuit tucked under her chin. Maya stood in the doorway for a moment and looked at her, the way she always did before a shift, like she was filing the image away somewhere safe, just in case. Just in case was a habit she couldn't break. 11 years in the Navy will do that to a person. She pulled the door closed without a sound. Got dressed in the dark. Slacks, buttoned down, the blazer she'd bought at a thrift store on Blanco Road for $4, because Burroughs had said the dress code was professional attire, which in her experience meant you were not allowed to look like you needed money, even when needing money was the whole reason you were there. She drove the company car to the address Burroughs had texted her at 11 p.m. the night before. The address was in Alamo Heights, which is the part of San Antonio where the driveways are longer than Maya's entire apartment. She pulled up to the gate at 5:38 a.m. and sat. The neighborhood was so quiet she could hear her own heartbeat. Elliot Voss came down the front steps at 5:51, 10 minutes late to his own car. He had a phone pressed to his ear and was still working one cufflink with his thumb, and he walked past the car, got halfway to the gate, stopped, turned around, and walked back. He opened the rear door himself, got in, did not look at her. Said, to nobody, or maybe to the phone, or maybe to the general concept of the universe bending to his schedule. Fulton Street. Go. Maya went. She did not say good morning. He had not said good morning. There was no morning, apparently. There was only Fulton Street and go. In the rearview mirror she watched him. Force of habit. In another life she had learned to read a room in seconds. Threats, exits, intentions. The way a man's shoulders sat when he was lying versus when he was just wrong. Voss had the posture of someone who had never once in 52 years wondered if he was safe. Not arrogance exactly. Something quieter and more total than arrogance. The posture of a man who had simply never had reason to wonder. She thought about her $43. She drove. 6 weeks went by. The way 6 weeks go, when you are broke and employed and surviving. One day at a time, which sounds like wisdom, but is really just math. Maya learned Elliot Voss the way she had learned hostile territory in another life. Not because she wanted to, but because she was wired for it. Because her brain categorized information the way other people breathed, without effort, without deciding to. He was in the car with her for sometimes 3 hours a day. She listened, she watched, she cataloged. He had 2 phones and used them both like they were enemies he was winning against. He took calls from people named Fredericks and Huang, and once, memorably, someone he addressed only as Senator, and during that call he said the words, "I understand your position," 4 times, while meaning the opposite each time. She could tell by the way his jaw shifted on the third one. He drank black coffee out of a thermos his assistant refilled every morning. He never ate in the car except once, a granola bar, which he consumed in exactly 4 bites with the efficiency of a man who considers chewing a meeting he is trying to get out of. He learned her name by week 3. Not because he asked, because Burroughs copied her on an email by accident, and he saw it in the thread. He started using it after that, the way people use the names of Siri or Alexa, not connection, just function. Maya, I need Fulton Street. Maya, wait here. Maya, there's a change of plans. She said yes sir every time, not because she was meek, because it cost her nothing, and banking goodwill from people who controlled your paycheck was just basic mission management. What she noticed, because she noticed everything, his security detail was 2 men, both former San Antonio PD, both retired, both soft in the way that men get soft when nothing bad has happened to them in a while, and they've stopped believing it could. Their radio protocols were the kind of thing that would have gotten a junior officer laughed out of a briefing room. There was a gap in the camera coverage on the southeast side of the Fulton Street building that lasted 4 minutes and 12 seconds every time the system cycled. The freight entrance on the east side of the building was used exclusively by janitorial staff and had no external surveillance at all. She knew all of this the way she knew the sound of Ximena's particular cough versus the cough that meant a doctor visit. Automatic, stored, not yet useful, not yet. The month before the 47 seconds, Maya was late on rent. Not catastrophically late. 21 days, which her landlord Mr. Peña described as getting into territory. Maya, with the resigned tone of a man who had been having this conversation with the world his entire life and had made a kind of peace with it. She paid him $300, which was not the full amount, but was what she had, and he took it and said he'd give her until the end of the month, and she said thank you, and meant it, and hated that she meant it. She sat in her car in the parking lot for a while after that. She didn't cry. She had stopped crying about money around the same time she stopped crying about everything else, which was roughly the year she came back from the last deployment, and realized the version of herself that used to cry had been replaced by someone quieter and more efficient. The crying version of Maya had had a husband. The current version had a daughter and a budget spreadsheet and a can of soup in the cabinet she was saving for the end of the week. She pulled out her phone and checked the account again, not because the number had changed, just to look at it, the way you press a bruise. Ximena needed new shoes. The left one had a crack across the sole that she'd fixed with a paper clip, which was both practical and, Maya thought, extremely her daughter, and also the kind of thing that made your chest do something complicated if you thought about it too long. She did not think about it too long. She started the car and went to pick up Voss. She had not told anyone about the Navy, not Burroughs, who had interviewed her with the energy of a man solving an extremely tedious puzzle. Not the other drivers at Meridian, 2 of them, older men who drank coffee from the same gas station every morning and had a comfortable friendship based entirely on complaining about traffic. Not Voss. There was nothing to tell, practically speaking. She had her DD-214. She had her licenses. She had a concealed carry permit that she renewed every 2 years, because the world was what it was. None of those things came up in conversation because she did not make them come up. What she had told people when pressed, I was in the military, past tense, 2 words, full stop. If they pushed, it was a long time ago, which was not entirely true. It had been 6 years since the medical discharge, which felt both like last week and like someone else's life. If they pushed further than that, she would find something to do with her hands, and the conversation would shift because people can feel when a door is closed, even if they can't see the door. The thing that had ended her service was not a thing she talked about. Not with her mother, not with her sister in Laredo, not with the VA therapist she'd seen 3 times before the copays got too high. The shape of it lived in her body, in the form of a scar on her left side, and a way she positioned herself in rooms, and the fact that she always, without thinking, sat facing the exit. She sat facing the exit in Voss's car too, rear-view mirror angled so she could see not just behind her but through the rear window, the side windows, the geometry of the space. He never noticed. Why would he? He had never needed to watch. It was a Thursday when she first saw the car. Rain. Not a dramatic rain, not the kind that announces itself, just the flat gray San Antonio drizzle that shows up in October like a rude houseguest and stays for days. Voss had a 3 p.m. at the Fulton Street office. Maya had pulled up to wait at 2:47, which was her habit, always 13 minutes early, never less. The blue rental was parked 40 feet past the legal stopping zone. She noticed it because of the engine, running, in the rain, with no movement inside except the driver. One person, driver's window cracked exactly 2 inches, which is a specific crack that means you want air without being observed clearly. She had sat in a vehicle with that exact 2-inch crack before. She had done it herself, in another context, in another life, in a country that no longer remembered her name. Driver was watching the lobby doors. Not his phone, not the street, the doors. She gave it 4 minutes before she called Burroughs. Burroughs listened with the energy of a man whose entire approach to crisis was to wait for it to become a certainty before acknowledging it existed. When she finished, he said, "Thank you for your concern, Maya. We'll make note of it." She hung up and looked at the blue car for another moment. Then she got out of the town car and walked. Not toward the rental, diagonal. Purposeless pace, hands loose, no eye contact. She was going nowhere in particular, just a driver stretching her legs in the rain. Anyone watching would have seen a woman in a blazer walking slowly on a wet sidewalk. Boring, forgettable. What she was actually doing was getting the angle. From 30 feet she could see the driver clearly enough. Male, sitting the way men sit when they are waiting for something specific rather than waiting in general. A stillness that is not relaxed, a stillness that is held, a stillness that has a purpose behind it and knows the purpose and is simply executing it. She had that stillness herself. She recognized it the way you recognize your own handwriting. She walked back to the town car, sat down. The rain tapped the roof. She opened her email and typed Burroughs a summary. What she had seen, the plate number she'd caught in the 30-foot pass. Her assessment, vehicle is in a surveillance position relative to the lobby entrance. Driver's behavior is consistent with a planned observation post. Recommend Mr. Voss use the freight entrance for the remainder of the week. Recommend security detail be notified with this plate and description. She typed it the way she had written every field report she'd ever written. Precise. No adjectives she couldn't defend. No speculation dressed as fact. Burroughs replied 12 minutes later. "Thank you, Maya. We will look into it." She read that in the rearview mirror at a red light and thought, very quietly and without particular emotion, God help this man. Friday was clear. One of those October afternoons in San Antonio where the air is cool enough to feel like a reward and the sky goes that particular shade of blue that seems too good to be real, like the world is showing off. Voss had a 6 p.m. dinner at the Magnolia Hotel, 40 blocks north. Maya had 3 routes she used depending on traffic and conditions. She had a preferred route and 2 fallbacks. The preferred route had better sight lines and fewer blind intersections and 2 exit options at the midpoint that the other routes didn't offer. She took the preferred route without explaining why. Nobody asked. Voss was on the phone. Both phones, actually, switching between them with the fluency of a man who had decided years ago that having 2 separate conversations at the same time was a reasonable way to live. He was talking about a shipping contract, and then talking about a board meeting, and then back to the shipping contract. His voice in the back of her car was the ambient noise of money being moved around. She was 3 blocks from the hotel when the blue rental came out of a side street. Not behind her, alongside, the parallel street to her left, matching her speed. She could see it in the gap between parked cars as they passed. Dark blue. Same car, same driver. The difference between being followed and being paced is that being followed is reactive, a car that adjusts to yours after you've already moved. Being paced is different. Being paced means someone already knows where you're going and is already there. She had 2 seconds to decide, and she spent 0 of them deciding. She did not say anything to Voss. He was talking about freight. She turned left. Not a slow turn. 42 miles per hour through an amber light, which she would not recommend generally, but which she calculated had an acceptable margin given the cross traffic. The town car was a large vehicle, and she took the corner, the way you take a corner when you know a large vehicle's weight distribution and you have driven in conditions where a wrong decision did not give you a second one. The blue car had been coming from the left. She had gone left. The intercept angle was gone. She drove. Not fast now. Too fast draws attention, and attention was not what she wanted. Steady. 2 more turns. Service alley behind the Magnolia. The freight entrance. She put the car in park. Got out. Opened the rear door. Voss was still on the phone. She said, "Mr. Voss, I need you to come with me, please." Something in her voice made him look up. That was the voice. The one that came from somewhere specific in her. Somewhere below the blazer and the $4 thrift store professionalism and the $43 bank balance. The voice that had once said, "Move to a team of trained men in a burning building," and they had moved. He moved. He moved. She walked him through the freight entrance with one hand at his elbow. Not grabbing, just present. just directional, through a hallway that smelled like hotel food and industrial cleaner, through a set of swinging double doors, and into the hotel kitchen. Stainless steel, fluorescent light, the soft machinery of a dinner service getting underway. A prep cook looked up from something and blinked. Maya said to the nearest employee, "Is there a north exit from this floor?" The man pointed. She said thank you. She moved Voss to a position near the wall that put two solid structural elements between him and the service entrance they'd come through. Then she stopped. 47 seconds, start to finish. She would count them later, reconstructing. 47 seconds from the moment she turned left to the moment she positioned him in the kitchen. He'd been on the phone for 31 of them. Voss stood in the kitchen of the Magnolia Hotel and looked at her. He had the look of a man who had just been moved through time without his consent. Not injured, not frightened exactly, but displaced, the way you feel when you fall asleep on a plane and wake up somewhere different. The phone was still in his hand, but he had stopped talking into it somewhere in the service alley and hadn't noticed. She could see it happening behind his eyes. The recalibration, the reaching for a framework and not finding one that fit. He said, "What just happened?" Not a question. The period at the end of it was real. She said, "A car that was at your office yesterday was pacing us on the approach to this hotel. I changed the route." He looked at her for a long time. Then he said, "How did you know it was the same car?" "Plate number." "You." He stopped, started again. "You had the plate number. I pulled it Thursday. I emailed the detail." Burroughs didn't say anything. "No," she said. "He didn't." Another long silence. The kitchen moved around them. A pot lid, someone calling a table number, the metallic sound of a commercial range doing its job. Voss seemed unaware of all of it. He was still doing the recalibration thing, working it through, and she watched him get to the part where the math didn't add up to car service driver and kept adding up to something else. He said, "Who are you?" And she could have answered that question. She had an answer for it. The answer was complicated and long and involved a lot of geography, and a scar on her left side, and a daughter who fixed her own shoes with paper clips. She said, "Your southeast camera coverage has a 4-minute gap every time the system cycles. You should get that looked at." Then she asked the prep cook about the north exit. They found the two men from the blue rental 6 blocks away, 40 minutes later. The police report would describe it as a vehicle stop following a tip, which was a polished version of the truth. The fuller version was that Maya had texted the plate number to a number she still had saved in her contacts from a previous life, and the previous life had come through. She did not mention this to the police. She told them what she saw. She answered what they asked. She did not volunteer. The motive, when it came out, and it came out over 3 weeks, in pieces, the way things do, was corporate, a competitor, the category of crime that happens when people with a lot of money decide they have run out of legitimate ways to win and start looking for other kinds. It made a small headline, the kind of headline that runs below the fold and gets forgotten by Tuesday. Maya's name was not in it. Voss had asked her, the night of, while they were still waiting for the police in a small room off the hotel lobby, "What do I call what you are? What were you?" She thought about that for a moment. The word "were," doing a lot of work in the sentence. She said, "I drove tanks before I drove town cars. The job is mostly the same." He looked at her. Then, for the first time in 6 weeks of sharing a car for 3 hours a day, he actually laughed. Not the managed version that men like him deploy in conference rooms. A real one, brief and caught off guard, like it escaped before he could decide whether to release it. She did not smile back. She was watching the door. He called her on a Monday, 3 days later. Not through Burroughs. Her direct number. He said he wanted to offer her a position. He said the title was Director of Executive Security. He said the salary, and then he said a number. She was standing in the parking lot of the H-E-B on Bandera Road when he said the number. She was holding a basket with a bag of rice, a can of black beans, and the specific brand of orange juice Ximena liked that was on sale for 2 more days. She said she would think about it. He said, "What is there to think about?" She said, 2 days, Mr. Voss, and hung up. She went inside and bought the orange juice. That afternoon she picked Ximena up from school. Her daughter came out of the building the way she always did, at full speed, backpack bouncing, hair falling out of the braid Maya had done that morning, already talking before she reached the car. Something about a project, something about a boy named Dario who had eaten paste, and whether that was bad for you, and whether Biscuit the rabbit counted as a living thing for the purposes of the science worksheet. Maya opened the car door for her, buckled her in, looked at the left shoe. The paperclip was still there, holding the sole together. Small piece of bent metal doing the work of something it was never designed to do. Ximena was still talking. Dario, paste, Biscuit, the unfairness of a worksheet that didn't specify. Maya started the car. She thought about the number Voss had said on the phone. She did not let herself feel anything about it yet. Not relief, not hope. Those were expensive feelings, and she had learned to stay away from them until something was actually real. Instead, she thought about it the way she thought about mission objectives. Clear, concrete, achievable, new shoes, rent paid on time, savings, a cushion, things that other people had that she had spent 6 years pretending she didn't need. She drove home. She called Voss back Tuesday morning. 7 a.m., before Ximena woke up, standing at the kitchen window with the real coffee, the kind with fresh grounds, that she had bought the day before, in an act of something she refused to call optimism. She said, "I'll take it, but I need 3 things." He said, "Name them. The southeast camera gap gets fixed before I start. Your security protocol gets rebuilt from scratch, and I report to you directly, not through Burrows." Silence on the other end. The specific silence of a man who was not accustomed to conditions being placed on his offers. She waited. She was very good at waiting. He said, "Fine." She said, "I'll see you Monday." She hung up and finished her coffee. Behind her, she heard Ximena's bedroom door open, and then the small sound of feet on the hallway floor, and then her daughter appeared in the kitchen doorway, still half asleep, hair wrecked, Biscuit under one arm, squinting at the light. "Mommy," Ximena said, the way she always said it, like the word was the whole sentence. "Morning, baby. You made real coffee." "I did." Ximena looked at her. 7 years old, and somehow already able to read a room the way Maya had been able to. Once, before the reading came from fear, and became just the way she moved through the world. Her daughter had not learned it from fear. Her daughter had learned it from watching. "Something happened," Ximena said, not a question. "Something changed," Maya said. Ximena considered this the way she considered most things, seriously, with her whole face, for about 4 seconds. Then she said, "Is it good?" Maya looked at her daughter. The unbrushed hair, the stuffed rabbit, the small face asking a small question that was also, depending on how you held it, the only question. "Yeah," Maya said, "it's good." Ximena nodded, satisfied. She climbed up onto the kitchen chair and asked if there was cereal, and Maya said yes and got it down from the cabinet, and the morning moved forward the way mornings do. Ordinary, unremarkable, the kind of morning you forget because nothing in it seems worth remembering. Maya poured the cereal, poured the orange juice, the good kind, Ximena's kind. She stood at the counter and watched her daughter eat, and she thought, for just a moment, about the $43, about the coffee made from used grounds, about the paperclip in the shoe. She filed those things away. Not erased. She never erased anything. That wasn't how she was built. But stored, the way you store field reports. Useful for context. Not useful for right now. Right now there was cereal and orange juice, and a daughter asking about paste-eating Dario and the ontological status of stuffed rabbits. Right now was enough. The security gap on the southeast camera got fixed that Wednesday. She knew because Voss texted her a photo of the work order, which she had not asked for but appreciated. Underneath the photo he had written 3 things accomplished before Monday. She did not reply to the text. She printed the work order and put it in the folder she had started. Clean, organized, color-coded, the way she had been trained to document operational changes. Old habits. She was learning, slowly, that not all of the old habits were bad ones. Some of them were just tools. They had been useful in one context, and they were useful in another, and the tool itself was neutral. Some of the others were harder. The sitting facing exits thing she had mostly stopped fighting, the counting of ways out, the reading of stillness in strangers. These things were in her body now, and her body was not interested in her opinions about them. What she was learning to do, slowly and badly and without a guidebook, was to point them somewhere useful, to let the watching serve something other than survival. She had spent 6 years watching, because watching was how she stayed alive, and kept other people alive, and got through to the next morning. She was starting to understand that watching could also be how you built something. She had watched Voss for 6 weeks. She knew his schedule, his gaps, his habits, the precise location of every weakness in his security and his routine. She knew which of his employees were competent, and which were coasting, and which were the ones who would actually answer the phone at 2 a.m. She knew all of this, not because she had been planning something. She knew it because knowing was what she did. Now she was going to use it. On her last day as a driver, she sat in the town car outside the Fulton Street building and waited for Voss to come down. Old habit, last time. It was a clear morning, cool for October in San Antonio, but not cold. The kind of morning where the light comes in at a low angle and makes everything look slightly more deliberate than it is, like the world has arranged itself for a photograph. Voss came down the steps at 8:03, on time, which was new. He came down without a phone in his hand, which was also new, and he walked to the car and opened the front passenger door instead of the rear. He sat in the front. She looked at him. He said, "I thought the new security director might want a briefing on the schedule." She said, "The new security director would prefer you ride in the rear of the vehicle when you're being transported by someone other than her, because the rear positioning reduces your exposure profile in a potential threat scenario." He looked at her. She looked back. He got out and got in the rear. She heard him, faintly, through the partition. What might have been a laugh, might have been a sigh, might have been both at once. She put the car in drive. In the rearview mirror, a man beginning, finally, to understand that there was someone near him who was more capable. Not threatened by it. Not yet. But aware of it in a new way, the way you are aware of solid ground after a long time on something unsteady. She had spent 11 years making sure people were safe, then 6 years trying to figure out what she was when that job was gone. It turned out she was still the same thing, just in a different room, watching different doors. The morning traffic was light. She took the preferred route. She noted the exits. She always noted the exits. That night, rent was paid in full, on time, 12 days ahead of when Mr. Peña had said the territory was getting difficult. She left the envelope in his mailbox on the way back from picking Ximena up from school. She did not stop to think about it or mark the moment or let herself feel the full weight of it, because that was not how she did things. She put the envelope in the slot and kept walking. At home, Ximena asked if they could have the orange juice again, and Maya said yes. Ximena asked if they could get new shoes this weekend, and Maya said yes. Ximena asked if the specific energy of a 7-year-old who has been saving up a question, whether Maya was happy. Maya thought about $43. About coffee made from used grounds. About 47 seconds in a car, and a man who had not once in 6 weeks looked at the person driving him and then looked up one day and saw her. She thought about the work order in the folder, the clean color-coded tabs, a job that asked the right things of her. She thought about the paperclip, still in the shoe. She hadn't thrown it away. She didn't know why. Maybe because it had worked. Maybe because she had learned, a long time ago in contexts that had nothing to do with shoes, that you kept the thing that worked, even after you had something better. She said to her daughter, "Yeah, I'm happy." Ximena accepted this, turned back to her homework, asked about Biscuit's eligibility for the science worksheet one more time. Maya sat down at the table next to her, opened the folder, started building something.